I gave people all the stuff they really needed. Social security checks, utility bills, TV guide.
I want a TV guidance counselor. TV guidance counselor. Staying up to watch all night, and everything's gonna be alright with my TV guidance counselor.
Hey everybody, welcome to TV Guidance Counselor. I am Ken Reed, as always, your TV Guidance Counselor as we wrap up summer here. Back to school, everybody. Still get that anxiety every year. Haven't been in school in 30 years. Not that long. Like 25 years. Somewhere less than that. I'm not good at math because I went to public school. Anyway, this is the show where each and every week I welcome an interesting person. We talk about classic television. It's a lot of fun. This week, my guest is writer Robert Fitzgerald. We talk a good amount about TV here. We don't use a TV guide because Robert has written a book called Hardcore Punk in the Age of Reagan. The Lyrical Lashing of an American Presidency. And this is sort of right in the sweet spot of the era of pop culture we discuss here on the show. And also, hey, it's punk rock, and you know I love that. And Robert's an awesome dude. Great stories. The book is great. I put links up. It's University of North Carolina Press. Buy this book. You will enjoy it. It's very well written. It's very interesting. If you like the sort of pop culture analysis of very specific place and time and sort of this sort of 80s era, which you probably do if you're listening to this show, you should buy Hardcore Punk in the Age of Reagan. Reagan, to me, is sort of the first TV president. I know that's someone's probably said that before. Someone's probably argued against it, but, I could elaborate further. But anyway, you're going to love this chat because I know I loved having it. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, author of Hardcore Punk in the Age of Reagan, Robert Fitzgerald.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Live via satellite. Robert, how are you, sir?
I am fine, Ken. Thank you for the invite. I appreciate this.
You're quite welcome. I'm very excited to have you on the show. As listeners know, I'm an old punk rock guy, and I discovered your book, your last book. You have another one coming out, and I was like, I got to talk to this guy because before we started recording, you were like, why is he having me on the show?
Yeah. So I listened to, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 podcasts. Love it. Episodes the other day, and I'm going, so let's see, Jane Seymour, Ted Danson, Weird Al Yankovic, right? That was cool.
You're in rarefied air with these people.
Yeah. I listened to your podcast with you guys in your band, which was cool. I actually pulled up that was awesome.
That one was so not format, but people had asked about that stuff, so I'm like, I have it.
No, that was great, man. And so I think I pulled you guys up on Bandcamp too, and listened to some tunes that are up there. Oh God, you start the album with a line from Goonies, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
From Mikey or whatever, telling everybody about it's our time. I'm like,
yeah. Well, thank you. You've done quite a lot of pre-work. I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, but I listened to the one, the episode with Jello on it, which was great. Kate O'Riordan, right? I love the Pogues.
Kate's awesome.
What a voice. Voice for years. But the Mike Watt.
Yep.
Minutemen. I was like, I got to listen to that one too. But my favorite by far, it was incredible, was Danny Boy.
Oh yeah.
I absolutely loved that one. I listened to it the other morning because I was like, I graduated from high school in '92. And
prime time for
yeah. Name like Robert Fitzgerald and some band or some hip hop group called House of Pain, so it comes out, it's like it's mandatory you become a fan. So that was cool. And that whole urban adventure thing he's got going on or did 10 years ago. I don't know. If
Delta Bravo.
Yeah. That was a really great episode. I really enjoyed that one, man.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, since then he bought the house from the Outsiders. He moved to
really?
Nebraska and he bought the house from the movie and he's refurbished it and made it into like an Outsiders museum.
That's awesome.
And he lives there and he's like in like a Nebraska guy now because he's so into the Outsiders.
Well, what an amazing story though, because you think of him and Everlast and Lethal, right? You don't think of Danny Boy from those videos as being like a TV movie junkie, right?
No.
And just like passionate about archival, personal archival. I mean, that's awesome.
Oh yeah, so into Fast Times he had to involve a drone.
Yeah, I remember that, the drone down on the Phoebe Cates pool. Yeah,
because I don't know if I mentioned it in the episode, but when I recorded with him, this is when I used to do it in person. I was renting a house in Franklin, off of Franklin, and right near the Hollywood sign. And he called me and he's like, "All right, I'm pulling up your street. I'm in a cop car."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What?" And he just pulls up in like an old cop car.
Yeah, he said I think in the podcast he said something like, "Yeah, nobody messes us. Nobody ever breaks my windows and takes my stuff."
Yeah. Hey, he's figured it out.
Yeah.
But speaking of, so you graduated in 92. Where did you grow up again?
So I'm all over. I mean, I got an interesting kind of personal story, which is kind of cool. I don't know if you're cool with that, me telling it, but
yeah. Oh, totally. No, that's
I was born in Fort Rucker, Alabama. Right. My dad was a military guy. Vietnam War vet, flew Hueys helicopters and decided to stay in the military when he got back. And so I was born in 74 down there. And then we almost immediately, before I was even a year old, we actually moved to England, which is really cool being a punk historian to know that you lived in England between 1975 and 1977, but you were one.
Where were you?
So we were about an hour and a half southwest of London, and a tiny little helicopter Royal Army Air Corps base called Middle Wallop, right? And
that sounds so.
Oh yeah, I know it doesn't it, right? But it's kind of in between Salisbury and Andover, right?
Okay.
But my dad was he got like this really cool exchange where a Brit helicopter pilot got to come to the U.S., right? And a U.S. helicopter pilot got to go there. And so, from the summer of 75 to the summer of 77, which, for punk enthusiasts like me, is kind of huge. Prime. I was living, an hour outside of London, right? And so, but yeah, we did that for two years. And then from there, moved to Fort Meade, Maryland. I don't really remember a lot about that. We were only there for a couple of years. I was still pretty young, right? I got some memories of neighborhood things, but not much more than that. But then we moved to from there we moved to Seoul, Korea.
Oh wow!
And so kind of at the height of the Reagan era, Cold War, kind of 81 to 83, I think, 84. We lived in Yongsan, which is kind of an American base in the heart of Seoul, and this was before Seoul had gotten the 88 Olympics, right? And so it was still pretty underdeveloped down there. My brother and I have very distinct memories of Itaewon, which is the kind of ancient open air market down there, being really raw, for lack of a better way to describe it, right? It was just kind of a raw experience for young American kids, but wouldn't have traded it for the world. I mean, the Korean people were wonderful to us. I ended up taking Taekwondo and, learning a little bit of the Korean language. We went to an international school there, so that's kind of where we started schooling, but, did that for a couple years, and then they sent us to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, for only 9 months. So that's a hell of a time when you're fourth grader or whatever it was, or third grader.
Real easy to make friends. Like
yeah. But my dad went to, at Fort Leavenworth, they have, the Army's got the Command and General Staff College. And the way he described it, it's kind of like a military master's in leadership, something along those lines. And so, we were there for 9 months. And after that, they sent us to the D.C. area. And my dad was working out of D.C. And we lived in Springfield, Virginia, which is Fairfax County. Actually, Dave Grohl is originally from there, right? To make a little naked.
Oh, yeah, when he was playing in Scream.
Yeah, make a little naked Raygun tie there, maybe, right? We can come back to.
Yep.
But yeah, did that. I was in fourth, fifth, and sixth grade there, and that's really probably where my interest in, or at least my connection to punk began. Not because I was into punk at that time. I mean, it's really crazy to live around DC, during Revolution summer of '85, and look back on it and go, yeah, I miss that because I was 10 or 11, right?
Right.
But my brother and I, we skated. We skated, we BMX'd, back then. And so it was kind of through skateboard culture that we brought with us to where we are now. And so in '86, my dad got the ROTC job at Illinois State University here in the amazingly named town of Normal, Illinois. And we moved out here in '86, and my dad ended up retiring here. Right, kind of before the first Gulf War, and it's pretty cool. It's kind of like a Chicago suburb, but we're 2 hours south of Chicago. And so we got Illinois State University, which is kind of where I've worked for many years until a couple of days ago. But then it's got Illinois Wesleyan University. It's got the headquarters for State Farm, right? And so it's a pretty cool, pretty convenient place to grow up and to raise a family. But it was here when we moved here that I started to kind of get associated with punk, particularly through my older brother, who was in high school at the time. And so we had some punks that went to our high school, and he kind of got introduced to some music and passed some tapes on to me. And so that was kind of my childhood in a nutshell, but how I eventually, got into punk music.
So you're basically in high school, like middle school, high school, like late 80s, early 90s in Chicago. So you're talking like Meat Men are still around, Screeching Weasel.
Yeah, so we're actually, I'm actually I'm 2 hours directly south of the city. Right, is where we're at. So I'm literally, the town I live in, Bloomington Normal, you get outside of our Twin Cities area and you're going to see nothing but cornfields for hours. And so it was crazy to think back on, to go, wow, we have a scene here. Right. And so it was really, '88 where we had a venue in, what was called downtown Normal at the time. It's now called uptown Normal.
Moving up in the world, Jefferson style.
Well, a lot of the places that were there when I was a kid aren't there anymore. We'll put it that way, right? Including the Gallery, which was kind of the alternative club that was down there that we had all ages shows, and so it allowed me a pretty cool opportunity as a freshman in high school. That's really when I really started getting involved in '88 as a freshman in high school to go to some shows and to actually start playing a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny, these like, not that Chicago's a second tier city, but I put it on the level with Boston where we're like college towns. It's not New York or LA. And at that time you have, for whatever reason, the music scenes tend to be more fruitful than like the major cities, because the big cities have the scrutiny of like industry and just like the turnover so much that stuff didn't have a chance to naturally sort of grow there.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I'm going to argue in my next book, or I don't know if "argue" is the right word or not, but suggest in my next book is that oftentimes when you study punk music, Chicago, the early Chicago scene, 80, 81, when we're talking about Naked Raygun and Strike Under and Effigies and some of these other bands that emerged at that time, they're peripheral in the historical narrative. And that's kind of unfortunate because they're phenomenal bands,
this is great bands.
And they went on to inspire incredible art, after. And so, it's weird when you think about it compared to kind of the coastal cities, especially, LA and New York, when you think about, punk history. DC, you can throw that in there
for sure.
Well.
DC. So, one side note, if you have not seen the Korean show, The Extraordinary Attorney Woo from a couple years ago, highly recommended. It's
okay. I haven't seen it.
It's about this lawyer with autism. It doesn't sound like it would be great, but it's really smart. It's very funny. It handles the character very well. Like, she's not like a magical Deus Ex Machina. It's difficult and it's very Korean, but it's funny and it's sweet and it's just really well done and the characters are really great. It's from maybe 3 or 4 years ago. If you have any Korean connection, the only Korean word I know is from that because they seem to end every sentence with mida. No idea what that means, but that seems to end every sentence.
I don't have an idea what that is either. Yeah,
it's like, okay.
I know Kamsahamnida and Chamaneo and a few other, colloquialisms, but that's about it.
There's that. The other thing is, and for my listeners, like there's so many inns here, places to talk here. No, the other thing is there's been an unusually high number of guests on this show who are military kids. Like a huge percentage. And
okay, that's cool.
I think it's unrepresentative of the culture at large. I think it's an outsized sample. And I suspect it's because a lot of kids who moved around a lot tended to watch a lot of TV because it was a constant, right? It was always there. And if, Family Ties is on Thursday at 8 in Boston, it's on at Thursday, at 8 or 7 in Denver or whatever, So they tend to do that. Which is my working theory. But so your last book is about sort of hardcore in the Reagan era. And it ties so much here because mostly came out of LA and DC, which makes sense. If you think of Reagan, I think of like California and DC at that time specifically. Yep. So that was kind of organic, but it was the first sort of ridiculous pop culture president, I think is fair to say.
I would agree. Yeah.
Which sort of changed everything that is still evolving for the worse in many ways. But it also happened to coincide with the time when sort of punk rock stopped being collegiate art kids, which it kind of was till that point, like for lack of a better term, and kind of moved to the suburbs. And you had sort of disaffected middle class kids. They weren't. I'm moving to the Bowery or tortured artist types. It was like regular kids.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean that's been really interesting. So my first book came out about, I don't know, it's a little more than a month now, right? And that's the Reagan book, right? Hardcore punk in the Age of Reagan. But what you're talking about there, I really have begun to see more of as I'm researching this next book, right? Which is, a biography of Naked Raygun, because even when you take a look at that band, it's original members, right? Which oftentimes aren't the members that many people know today. They were Loyola or UIC art school students, right? Or hanging around those art schools at the time, like Jim Caleo, the drummer, Santiago Durango, Jeff Pizzotti's older brother, Marco, right? Who ended up quitting the band because he wanted to focus more on, being kind of a performative artist, right? Rather than a musician. And Marco's out in New York right now, and is involved in some art stuff out that way. But it was really interesting to go, wow, there's a change in some of the research that I was doing as I was writing, starting to write a chapter on, punk in early Chicago. People were talking about some of the early venues like La Mer Vapeur, right, and others, and they're like, yeah, it was great until the asshole element.
The Beach Kids.
And I mean, out in LA, I mean, that was the Huntington Beach Kids, right? And, in Chicago, maybe that was the guys from Naperville, which is where the Pizzotti brothers were from, although I don't think anybody in the scene would ever call them that because they're so well respected. But you did get a sense of, punk started as, an opportunity for kids who needed voice, maybe in their communities and in their schools even, and very, not very quickly, but maybe within a matter of years, they're going, well, wait a minute, the guys who used to, give us crap in the hallways are now, singing in these bands, right? And coming to our shows and coming to our venues. And so I think you see them, get out and move into other things, move into other interests. Yeah,
a lot of them became authors.
And the emergence of hardcore.
Yeah, right? and the sort of elephant in the room with that too is I think it became much more male as well.
Yeah. I wouldn't even say it's an elephant in the room, right?
Yeah, it's Penelope Spears has been on and talking to her about that, seeing that sort of shift.
Yep, I saw that too.
It's interesting because there were not a ton of women in the punk scene prior to that, but a fair amount, especially in England. And in the hardcore scene that came out of it, I mean, there's like 2.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Once hardcore takes over, you know, and I don't know what scenes, you know, to blame, if you can say that, right? I mean, I don't think any scene's to blame, because I think you can see that it happens almost simultaneously in different areas, right? Even if we're to look at the big three, you know, whether it's LA area, DC, or New York. But yeah, it pretty quickly becomes an all dude affair, unfortunately, because some of the best, you know, earliest punk bands, you know, were either female fronted, all female.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could say that the Runaways, you know, in many ways, you know, kind of got this started, or
the Avengers, or
the Avengers,
even the adverts.
Houston, you know, it was just incredible. Yeah. Oh yeah, you know, the Slits in London, you know, an all girls crew. Even the Go-Go's, which a lot of people don't know, started, you know, in kind of the punk scene. Yeah, that you know, it got injected with a huge dose of masculinity that really is what hardcore, you know, became characterized, right? But then, you know, you do have the critique of it as well. You know, I mean, Jello Biafra's later work with Dead Kennedys, you know, songs like Chicken Shit Conformist, I remember listening to that going like, yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying, right? It's like, you know, hardcore has really become formulaic, right? These bands seem to sound like the same bands over and over again. And maybe I should start, you know, broadening my palette a little bit.
Yeah, when you look at the lineups of those earlier days, I mean, they're like the Screamers are on a show with the, you know, the Germs and, you know, the Alley Cats or something like that. You're not going to get a more diverse, at least in that scene, or the Plugz or something like that. You know, and then, you know, fast forward 2 years later and you have, you know, Bad Religion headlining with 3 other bands that sound like Bad Religion, you know, it's like,
but that's a good way to describe it.
But that's what people want. You know, they want like junior versions. And I think it ties into culturally, you know, in the early 80s, you had this sort of disaffected maleness that was sort of, this was the first generation that didn't have like an active war with a draft going on as a teenager and a young adult.
Yeah. And so, you know, I called it, you know, so in the book, the Reagan book, right? I guess we'll call it the Reagan book, and then we'll call it the Naked Reagan book.
Not
right?
Naked Reagan. We don't want to see that.
Yeah. No. Right. So the Reagan book, you know, what I tried to do is I tried to take each chapter, and, you know, name it after a song. Right. And then look at other songs that maybe fit within, the theme, right? For lack of a better way to describe it. And so, you know, like the first chapter is called Reagan's In, right? Obviously by the Wasted Youth song. But then the next one, after Only in America is the name of the second chapter, which is from the Naked Raygun song, one of my favorite songs ever. You know, it's got saxophone in it, right? I mean, who's putting saxophone in punk songs, right? In 84, 85, when Throb Throb came out for them. But the next one is called, you know, and forgive my language here. You know, sometimes I know there's cursing on the show, right? But when you're still in education, it's just one of those things where you're like, oh man, is some kid I'm going to teach listen to this at some point, right? But yeah, you know, and what I always say to people is, they're not my words.
Just
right?
quote
like my aunt's like, my aunt read the book, or at least part of it, and was like, "Damn, there's a lot of words in there." And I'm like, "They're not my words. They're not my words. I'm a historian now." But it's, you know, it's "Fuck Armageddon, This Is Hell," right? Which is named after
Bad Religion song,
the Bad Religion tune. But that chapter was centered on this idea of what I called like general disaffection, right? I focus on lyrics. You know, I read Kevin Mattson's book that came out, I think, in 2020. I don't know if you're familiar with it. We're Not Here to Entertain. Awesome book. And I mean, Kevin was incredible. He was a reviewer, I think, of my book. He gave, you know, great insight. You know, he's so cool to see him plug it, you know, on the back. When I read Kevin's book, you know, I remember going like, wow, that was awesome. But I wanted more lyrics, right? Because for some reason, I don't know why, I'm drawn to the words, right? I love the music, I love the sound, but it was the words in particular that got me interested, right? Even though in a lot of bands that are inaudible, right, or indecipherable.
Right, but with hardcore too, I think, you know, but because the musical formula is so similar, the lyrics are kind of the differentiator. To oversimplify, but more so than, you know, the bands all could have to a degree, have sort of interchangeable backing tracks for some of those groups.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. Yeah. But the whole the general disaffection piece, right, was really, based on what you're talking about, and that is really, white male suburbanites, age, I don't know, we could probably go 14 to 25, right, at the time, when you take a look at some of the bands, right, that really we're latchkey kids. They're talking about, even Bad Religion's got songs about being a latchkey kid, in the valley there. And so I was drawn to that, right? I'm like, wow, these kids really feel like their world is awful for some reason, right? And so I really wanted to take a look at, what was it? And so, I looked at songs like that, Black Flag's Depression, great song with either Dez or Henry singing it. It's like, why are these kids singing about that? And so I dug deep kind of into some of the history. I looked at, I can't remember the author, but Crabgrass Frontier.
Oh, yeah.
It was a fantastic book. Kenneth Walker, maybe, if I recall correctly. Just to try to understand the mindset at the time, but then I also started thinking about, mall culture, right? And, when you talk about Fast Times at Ridgemont High, how quickly it went from this incredible mall culture to, we're not going there anymore, right? And I mean, these places are gone. And just to try to understand why these kids were feeling the way that they did, and then how they expressed that lyrically, I thought was really cool.
Yeah, it's sort of a, and I see this on television and especially movies and stuff at this time as well, and this is sort of ushered in by Reagan. You have this generation of kids who almost don't have anything on paper bad enough to explain why they feel bad, while at the same time there's this existential threat of imminent destruction of the entire world with the Cold War stuff that was uniquely escalated under Reagan. And the 70s hangover of Carter, who was kind of like the adult being like, hey guys, you fucked up. All right. We messed up. Let's fix it. We'll deal with it. And people instead said, no, we want to go with Reagan's complete sort of fabricated, make us feel better vision of reality. And so that's when we start to get this weird disconnect between the sort of reality of stuff and the veneer of sort of comfort. You're in a suburb, your parents are semi well-to-do, but you don't see them ever. You're not working in a coal mine or, child labor, and you're not at a war, but that doesn't mean you're not miserable. And what's that about? So this sort of fits into that Reagan disaffected selection. And you end up getting this sort of male rage, I think, without an outlet. The majority of which go into this sort of hardcore world. But for some guys, I think it's that same fire that sadly made them become like Rush Limbaugh people. It's like almost that same desire. But we have, all this sort of apocalyptic movies and television. And the other really thing that fascinates me about this youth movement is the people who were making media at this time had nothing to equate it to. And when they tried, it was like 50s, gang, like rumble gangs. And it's nothing like it. So when you see the TV shows that handle this, like the infamous Quincy episode or Chips or something, they're handling punks like they're, West Side Story. And it's like, no, this is something different. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, it was grossly misunderstood. Now, I'm never going to say that punk wasn't like violent, right? That it was, but when you like one of the chapters I wrote is called Police Story, right after the Black Flag song, and like even doing research for the book, I was dumbfounded, right, as I went through and read these stories. Like, so in the index or the appendix of the book is a list of all of these songs that somehow directly reference Reagan, right? And there's over 100 in the U.S. and across the world. There's as many, if not more, but I didn't put it in an index because I just wanted to focus on Reagan, because I did think like, wow, maybe this would be another book, right? At some point, there's almost that many, if not more, about policing, right? And not just in America, and not just across the world, right? And one of the things I do argue is that these are white male youths from backgrounds of means that in many ways had the privilege to be able to say these things at this time when a lot of other artists weren't able to. But man, if they're right, you know, in the way in which punks were treated, and not just show stopping, you know, it was pretty nasty at times. I mean, the Elks Lodge Riot, I remember reading about that, even though it's outside of the time frame. I'm like, I got to talk about this. You know, I got to talk about this event, I think in 79, right? When the Go-Go's were set to play and the Plugz and the Weirdos. And I mean, when you read about the descriptions of people then, and even looking back on it, you know, I mean, it's macabre how these kids were treated for being different.
Yeah, the LAPD had like task forces just for Black Flag. Like they literally treated them like they were the Bloods and Crips. Like they looked at it like a street gang. And
and I mean, their SST offices were raided. Yeah. They thought they were like selling drugs. They were like a drug gang.
Yeah, like bikers, because they don't know. They're like, well, you look crazy. You must be like a biker gang from the 60s selling speed. And they're like, no. Like, we don't understand.
Yeah. Which is crazy because then you have, you know, the police looking at it maybe from that vantage point. But then I don't know if the word regular, right, is something. But your regular late 1970s, early 1980s person listening to, you know, I don't know, Judas Priest or whatever, right, with long hair, thinking they're all queer.
Yeah, that was the other thing people don't understand today is that, like, metalheads were like, these punks are like crazy queers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When one of the first interviews I did with Jeff Pizzotti of Naked Raygun, he just came out and said, he's like, the heavy metal people, they just fucking hated us. You know, he's like, they just hated us. It was weird. I'm like, okay. And I've tried to explain that to my own children a little bit, who, you know, I'm so glad they grow up in the time that they grow up, where, you know, their tastes, right, their cultural tastes can be all over the place, right? And I try to explain to them, like, you know, there was a time in like 88 where, you know, if you went to the mall, you know, and even here, you know, in central Illinois, and you were wearing something, you know, you were wearing some type of T-shirt, or you had your hair in some way, like, people were like, you know, you were vilified for that look. Yeah. Right. And it was directly connected to the music that you were listening to, which is so weird to think about.
It's very strange. I mean, you know, and seems so silly, but I mean, that a lot of things that mean so much to us when we're kids, like as an adult now, when, you know, when adults would be like, none of this will matter and whatever. And you're like, whatever, shut up. You know, now that I'm an adult, I'm like, they're right. For a lot of that stuff where you're like, you know, suicidal tendencies and, you know, Metallica are so different. like they're kind of not though. But you know, if you had said that at the time, you're out of your mind.
Well, that's why for me it was huge because I like the first records I ever bought, right, were Run DMC. Yeah. Like I loved, you know, in '84, you know, out in DC. I mean, I remember hearing like Roxanne by UTFO on the radio, and I'm like, wow. You know, and then I got the Fat Boys tapes, right? And I'm like, I fell in love with that. And so like hip hop before punk rock, right? And then it was so great when you saw, I'll never forget when I saw, it was one of the Bones Brigade videos, right? And Steve Caballero or one of those guys, you know, wearing like a Louis Vuitton, right, leathered Gucci hat or something, and maybe having a hip hop song in the background, like, oh, the two subcultures that I love seem to be merging, right? Which was really cool. And then, you know, Anthrax and Public Enemy did Bring the Noise. I'm like, thank you, right? It's like, okay, right, we can do something.
Yeah, I mean, especially in New York, they shared so much DNA. And, you know, in my old man complaining about music, I'm always like, the last, like, true innovative movement was hip-hop, in my view. And everything since then has been retro or just recombining things that have already been done.
I would agree very much so.
To me, hip-hop was like a further evolution of punk, in that it was like, we don't need to learn 3 chords, we'll take the ones you already played. So it was like this extra, and then I hear about like the street battles where they're like cracking open street lamps and stealing the power, and I'm like, this is punk rock. This is what, like, this is
Beat Street was on my VHS recorder. Like I watch, I didn't watch much TV, right? I hate to admit that on your show. That's why when it was like, pick a TV guide, I'm like, Well, we had one TV in the house, and Dad kind of dominated it when he got home, and that's why I had a skateboard, I had a
going
bike,
out.
and I played sports, and but it was a lot of movies, right? I remember watching movies when I was a kid, and Beat Street was incredible. Holy crap! I mean, I own the DVD now. It even looked like seeing Kumo D in it, right? As the Treacherous Three and the Christmas rap scene. But Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. I mean, because I was into breakdancing right at that time, and so Beat Street came out, and I was enamored by that story. And so but the scenes where they're stealing electricity right from the power lines out back, so they could have the house party in the dilapidated, burnt out 1977 Bronx high rise.
It's like apocalyptic. It's like, this is a real thing.
Oh yeah.
How is this? It sort of equates with the all those half-built, abandoned suburban developments in the outskirts of Los Angeles, where these kids are skateboarding in rotten pools. It's kind of a similar. They're sort of dancing on the grave of the previous generation's hopes. Yeah,
I taught history for 27 years before I moved into kind of school administration. And I would show my APS history class pictures of the Bronx as burnt out.
Insane.
And I mean, I wouldn't tell them what it was, right? They think it's a war zone. It's like, no, that's the Bronx.
Yeah. There's a famous photo someone shares with me of, even here in Boston, when they were around the same time. There's a picture of a big old TV that it's all gutted, and there's just a kid like sitting in there out in the middle of a vacant lot.
Yeah.
And it looks like something from the war game or something.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, no, that was the North End in 1981. But then it becomes weirdly reflexive too. So then you start getting it, like, I think of like a band like Discharge or someone like that, who sort of is like the closest UK equivalent to the hardcore stuff, who are even more apocalyptic, and they are using like samples from the war game, or like threads, or like these really apocalyptic things. And it sort of starts upping the ante on stuff here. Until probably 87, 88, when everyone either quit or became heavy metal bands.
Yeah, it's about that time, right? You could say the crossover started maybe a little bit before then, right, for some of those bands, but by 87, 88, I don't think hardcore punk ever dies, right? I think it morphs, right, and becomes a new version of itself with a lot of the strains, right, that resonate throughout the different eras. But it's pretty distinctly different. But I think, you got to give Bad Religion, right, in that Suffer album, I think, a lot of credit there in 88. I think it came out, right, for really kind of, establishing, it's like, no, we can still do this. It's a little different, right? It's a little different than maybe you're used to. But there's still something there, and there's still something to shout out about, right? And so I thought that's
elevated. So it's almost exactly tied to the two Reagan administration years. Like 80 to 88 is like almost to a silly degree the exact sort of window of that particular genre of hardcore in all these cities across the US. And, part of that is because Black Flag tours, and they kind of seed every single city they go to, as did Husker Du. But I feel like
get in the van, right?
I feel like Black Flag was probably musically more influential, because people would watch Husker Du and be like, I don't know, I can't do that. Like Black Flag, we could do this.
They took it literally that it was unsafe.
100%. And then the people who'd been around a while are like, well, now I want to try and make a living here. So, I'm in SSD, and I'm going to make How We Rock, or, TSOL becomes Guns N' Roses sounding stuff. And it sort of does. It sort of it doesn't die, but what you end up having is this sort of, it all splinters and scatters. So you get that Bad Religion strain, you get kind of the Lookout Gilman Street stuff up in San Francisco, which is is musically, if you listen to it, sounds like hardcore bands, but they'll call it pop punk.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, they're playing lightning fast. And
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, when I was listening to your band, I was trying to think like, okay, So who are some other bands that, like, in my research I've listened to? And the one that came almost immediately to mind was Surrogate Brains. From up that way.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
a self-indulgent aside, it's funny because we were playing in Boston when this sort of street punk UK 82 Oi revival started here. And I was thinking about this a lot recently. Someone interviewed me for a documentary about sort of 90s Boston punk. And it hit me that the sort of 90s Boston punk kids sort of cosplayed or envisioned this like mystical world of like 80s UK skinheads that didn't exist, like that was kind of what they were like aspiring to in this weird way. It was like their Ren Fair almost, right? And it wasn't for us, and we were playing with all those bands like that, but we were listening to Big Black and Naked Raygun and West Coast early 80s bands, and we're so out of phase. We're touring with the Business, and it didn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, I dug it, right? The first song, what the hell? The first song, where you do quote the
Stand Your
Goonies.
Ground, I think is that song, yeah.
Stand Your Ground. That's a great
thank
tune.
you.
Yeah, that was a great tune. I enjoyed that, listening to that today. I didn't get much farther. I was maybe 3 or 4 songs in on the ride home.
Well, if you listen to more, I'm curious to hear what you think. But we were...
Well, there's a Motorhead. I saw there's a what do you guys do? Ace of Spades?
Yeah, I do Ace of Spades, which I knew mostly from the band Battalion of Saints.
Oh, yeah.
Who did a great...
Out of what started Houston band, moved Houston to San Francisco.
Yep, and then Boston for a while, and put out stuff on Tang.
Oh, did they? Okay, I didn't know that.
So it's that's actually reminds me of the other weird, interesting sort of Reagan thing is there's sort of an entrepreneurship that is tied into this where that's hey, you can be a businessman if you're into punk rock. And it's all these people starting labels like Sean Stern with BYO or Tang here in Boston or, Alternative Tentacles. Like some of it's necessity. Bad Religion starting Epitaph so they can put out their own record.
Yep.
But all of these labels that were made by these, sort of degenerate kids become massive corporations by the early 90s.
Yeah, Epitaph is huge.
It's nuts.
Alternative Tentacles, I think, isn't as big, but still is a big major label.
SST.
SST. Discord.
Touch and Go even,
still
which I think was Tesco V's.
Which is kind of ironic because for 2 reasons. The first is I didn't go into much detail about this in the book, but the punk kids in many ways with the DIY sensibility out Reagan.
Yeah, you said it better than I did. That I was trying to say. It's exactly that.
And so it's this really awesome thing. Like we're not going to rely on you to tell us what our art should sound like or what our art should be like, right? We're not going to change our art to get on your label or do whatever. Although some did, right? Yeah. Obviously. But we're going to do it ourselves and we're going to make our own labels. And, listening to Ian MacKaye talk about, the parties where they would fold the original Teen Idols singles, right? They'd have parties, right? And everybody would come over and they're licking them and they're gluing them and they're stuffing them in there. I mean, that's incredible to think about at the time because, the whole Reagan idea was you don't need the help of the government to do anything for you. You don't need anybody else's help, right? Get on it, do it yourself, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And I think in many ways, those punks that we're talking about, that's exactly what they did. Yeah. And the irony of that for Naked Raygun, who is by far my favorite band, because of the proximity to Chicago. There's a whole story behind that also from my youthful days. But they didn't start a label, right? And so one of the things I'm trying to look at is why didn't Naked Raygun maybe become right the band that others did? And when I was talking about a label, Jeff's like, I ran a label for a very short amount of time. He goes, that sucks. It's
a different thing, man.
Like really hard work.
You want to be a small business owner? That's a different thing.
Yeah. That seems like it's miserable. I want to play music.
It's pure capitalism, which is the funniest thing to me. Like they're embracing supply side economics and building means of production and distribution methods.
They didn't know about the Laffer Curve, but they were practicing it.
like inadvertently, which is this weird irony that would come to fruition in the 90s, like post Nirvana, Lookout's huge because of Green Day, and like these guys are becoming billionaires off the back of having started a small business out of necessity, which really truly is sort of the most Reagan-y thing possible if you can look at anything from Reagan as a positive. That seems to be it. But you have guys like Ian MacKaye or Albini who want to still do that, but try and fight against it at the same time. So like you have Albini who, till the day he died was running his studio with the sliding scale of affordability.
I did listen to that episode as well. That was cool.
Loved that guy.
That episode with Albini did. Yeah, back in 2016, I think. Yeah.
And he's a guy that stuck with his sort of core ethics on that stuff till death.
Yeah, he has his principles and he wasn't changing them.
Yeah, but at the same time was like, but you got to make a living, and I can do it without compromising this stuff. It's possible.
And you know what's crazy about that, his studio where he engineered out of? The Naked Raygun guys put all the HVAC systems in it because that's what they did.
That's amazing.
Yeah, Jeff Pizzotti's got a degree in mechanical engineering from University of Illinois, Chicago. And so kind of helped his dad run the HVAC business. And then Eric Spicer, the drummer, worked for them. And they put in all the ductwork and the heating and cooling unit in Steve's recording studio.
That's not that dissimilar from like SST, where like, Greg Ginn was making like capacitors and radio parts. And that's how he met, oh my God, why am I forgetting Keith Morris, who was working for him, putting together packages to mail out for like ham radio parts. It's like...
Working in the back shop.
And like Greg Ginn had 2 or 3 U.S. patents as a teenager and, his own mail order business. So it's stuff where if you described just the the basic facts of those, you'd be like, oh, well, that must be like a young Republican Reaganite. And you're like, no.
Well, I think it's evidence of what I tried to push out in the book. And that is, listen, there's some punk bands. When you listen to them, you're just like, that's absurd. It's not even rational what you're doing. It's just you're being obnoxious for the sake of being obnoxious. And I tended to ignore those, right? Because my argument is no, these are really, really smart people.
Yeah.
They have an intellectual understanding at the time about pretty significant national and global issues that most Americans are just like turning a blind eye to. Right. And so I think what you're saying about Greg Ginn, right, and what he was doing with transistor radios in SST or, what running the label at Discord. I mean, these are really smart, intelligent young people, many of whom didn't have college degrees. Right. Many of whom some didn't even finish high school. But in what I argue is that intellectualism comes out in their lyrics if you give them a try. Mm-hmm. Right. If all you do is turn it on and push play, unless you love punk, you're probably going to go, this is awful. But if you strip it down, right, you look at the wording, right, and you try to understand what it was these bands were trying to say and how often they were trying to say it across scenes, across the country, I think it paints a really different picture than punk usually is given by mainstream historians. I mean, I could not find a mainstream history book on the Reagan years that talked about punk. No. It would have to be a book on culture, right? And then it would maybe be briefly mentioned, right, in a chapter on music, right, that would also talk about MTV and Madonna and, the second British wave, right, coming over. But, it was really, and you'd read about scholars, right, who were critiquing Reagan. You'd read about, other critiques on the left, but it's like this is I kind of describe it as a real-time populist grassroots folk resistance, right, that is ignored by like pretty much everybody, right, when we talk about the history of the U.S. in a meta-narrative sense, right, as opposed to getting more critical with it. And so I just think it offers us pretty cool insight, and they deserve some credit because it is some pretty awesome stuff.
I think shock value makes it easy to write things off for people.
Absolutely.
And, you did have you got Prince with Ronnie Talk to Russia. They'll mention Heaven 17, with Let Me Go, or or talking about Reagan, which is hilarious because the guys in Heaven 17 are the most hardcore socialists I've ever encountered in music, like to this day, which you wouldn't necessarily think, from their music, but, you might get that mentioned, or like 99 Luftballons is about, the Cold War, but it's like, but there's 50 bands in every major city in America that have started an underground distribution method and touring circuit to basically talk about this stuff to the youth,
Well, unfortunately, I think the number that what you described there in terms of numbers helps explain why sometimes it gets written off, because when 50 bands are saying the same things, pretty soon people go, well, they're just parroting one another, and so that's why you had, I can't remember where Chronic Sick was from. I think they were from Jersey. They described themselves as like the ugliest hardcore band ever, but they put out a song you can barely decipher any of the words, but it's called Reagan Bands, right? And it's basically a rip on how every punk band, from 81 to 87, right, or 86 is just railing on Reagan. Right. And so punk even parried itself there for a little bit because, when you see all of these songs, it's like, well, they can't all be that intelligent. Right. And so unfortunately, I think some naysayers and some detraction comes from that the sheer amount. Right. That we saw out of these bands, which it's natural. Right. To mimic the bands that you like, mimic the bands that maybe you read about in Maximum Rock and Roll. Right. Or Flipside or whatever it is. But unfortunately, I think that makes some people be like, that it's not as sincere as maybe we'd like it we'd like to believe it is, but I just don't think that's the case. We get
some people latching onto the superficial aspects of it, right? The sort of loud, fast, and this is what it sounds like, and this is what it looks like, and not why it sounds like that and looks like that. Again, evidenced by Bad Religion, where when they had that comeback in '88 with not even a comeback really, but the sort of return, they're playing the same stuff, but with this level of sophistication in like the harmonies and the other stuff that was never done before, but doesn't make them sound like a prog rock band. Like they've just elevated what they were doing. And that's kind of why you had this, this 8-year period where in '88 now, all those bands who had kind of just found the superficial aspects of it were either like, well, it's obvious we suck, or they moved on to some other genre or became a metal band or, whatever it was, because they weren't able to do that next step of like an innovation or like evolve what they were doing.
And I think with Bad Religion, you bring up a great example. And in fact, I have a chapter. We have a book coming out. So I don't know if you know this or not, but there's a network that's actually called the Punk Scholars Network.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, punk scholarship is I wouldn't say a resurgency because I would say that it was before, but there is an active community or of people in the academy that are interested in really taking a look at punk, right? So I'd encourage you and any of your listeners to look it up, but because it's a great group of people across the world that are looking at punk from a scholarly perspective. But we have a book coming out, a group of us dedicated entirely to Bad Religion, right? And so it's on Intellect Books. It should be out within the year, and it's Bad Religion, something like philosophy, power, and pedagogy, or something along those lines. But the chapter I wrote is called "From Hell to the End of History." Right, the lyrical evolution of Bad Religion. Right, and again, focusing on lyrics. And one of the things I kind of argue in the chapter is that that's a band that just got better. Not just music wise, right, but lyrically, right? Their lyrics got like you need we call it like thesaurus.
Yeah,
punk,
I think them and
right?
Shriekback are the bands that I need a dictionary at hand for, because there's going to be at least 2 words per album I've never heard in my life.
Yeah. So every Bad Religion that came out, I'm sitting there thinking like, God, I didn't think Greg Graffin could get more deep, right? Right? Or or Brett with the words, but I think they're their development over time from '88. I've seen them probably 4 or 5 times, even within the last 5 to 10 years. I love Bad Religion, but the intellectualism of their lyrics for me kind of personifies or characterizes what I see as kind of the true essence of punk, and that is this is an intelligent critique of geo-social, political, economic affairs.
Yeah, in a digestible way, like metaphor is used. Yep. Incredibly well in those things, and then at the same time, speaking of Bad Religion, they're starting to get some stuff on MTV, like when Suffer comes out, or maybe Generator.
That moved to Atlantic.
Or even before that, I think Generator had a video that was on 120 minutes, and we start seeing that.
So that would have been so if I remember right, that would have been the last. So that if I can't remember if that album's on both.
Recipe for Hate was
there's
on
one
both.
album.
Yeah.
Was it okay? All right, good. Thank you. Yeah. I remember there was one on both. So Generator.
And some bands bubbling up from that are coming out. And you mentioned the skateboard videos. That's another aspect that doesn't get mentioned that much either, where you get this sort of alternative sport that also makes its own pre-internet sort of viral content with this whole network of tape trading and making these tapes, like making this alternative sort of programming. But at the same time, you get a show like Nickelodeon is doing a show called Skate TV that's actually cool. Like it actually was the real people and the real stuff in there on Nickelodeon in 1987.
Oh yeah. No, I distinctly remember, again, not doing much TV, but I mean, watching, a third copied VHS of Animal Chin, or Wheels of Fire with Natas Kappas on it that had been taped like for 4 different people, and how it gets fuzzy right with each new taping. Yeah, very much like the tape trading of the time period.
It's like this alternative.
We couldn't go onto YouTube and watch this.
It's this
stuff.
alternative distribution network that people are sort of creating out of necessity and want, which seems like it would be forever. But when you look back now, it's a blip. It's that little blip of. Maybe 20 years from 80 to 2000 before the internet takes over, when VCRs are cheap and Walkmans and that kind of stuff that weren't accessible to a lot of kids and now are, you have this weird thing where, people can have access to photocopy machines and they can make zines, and it's really a very small amount of time. Yeah.
It's a brief window. It really is. Yeah. And then I think a lot of that brief window, same thing. I don't know the hip hop, what it was and maybe what it became, right? And whether commodification of those two subcultures, by the end of the '80s, that brief window I think is, we can make money.
Yeah, and then it becomes about making money. When you look at Public Enemy, and then 5 years later, rappers talking about everything they own. It's a different world there. It's like that's a major shift in a very short amount of time.
That golden, I mean, so a TV show I watched, right, to bring the TV in, man, I went home as soon as I could to turn on MTV Raps. That and maybe Rap City that was on BET. I don't know if you ever watched that one when we ended up getting cable actually in my house, because I loved music, and the coupling of the visual right to the audio was so huge, and so I mean that was a show where I didn't want to miss in 1988, which some people, they talk about the golden era, right, of hip hop or whatever. I didn't want to miss if Big Daddy Kane's Ain't No Half Steppin' video came on, right? I had to see that, so I'm like rushing home to see those things.
But that's the other, there's a unique period where the music and the visuals are now married together in the 80s, and they're distributed in a way that kids can see what these punks look like. They can see what the bands look like. They can see what the shows look like without having to go there. And it's easier to inspire stuff nationwide and people for latching onto these cultures, be it hip hop or punk or whatever. Like as a kid, I remember seeing Another State of Mind on USA Network. They used to have a show called Night Flight. And I think I saw that in 86 or 87 at 2 a.m. And, that is a whole world that opens up of, instead of just hearing a song. I mean, same with Repo Man and that kind of stuff.
But when you look at that, I mean, I love that video. I mean, Mike Ness and Social Distortion. I mean, what a
Yeah.
poet. You know, just love Social Distortion, have forever. I mean, Another State of Mind was one of the first things I ever saw that was punk oriented. But you know, that version of punk, that's intimidating though, right? I mean, you watch that and you're like, oh, geez, look at these guys. I mean, the drugs and the drinking and the fighting and the slamming. And then you think about in '91, I think it was when Smells Like Teen Spirit music video. I mean, that was an attractive image of like the intensity of the music. And so all of a sudden, like people that would have never listened to that type of music are like, this is palatable.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was a frustrating thing for many of us who had been listening, to that kind of music for a very, very long time, right? To go like, wait a minute, you like this now? Where'd that come from?
Like I remember, I forget if I've told this on the show before, but I remember seeing Green Day and they had Pansy Division open for them. And for people who don't know Pansy Division, they were like a I always say like attitude wise, they were like Motley Crue, but for dudes, and they're all dudes. Musically, they weren't.
It's a good way to describe them.
Weren't super have a lot of bite. They're pretty pop punky, but this was right when Dookie got huge. So you have a lot of like frat dudes and these kind of guys going out to this show, and Pansy Division's going out, and they are sexually harassing these frat dudes in like the most vile ways. And these guys do not know what to do with this. And it was such from like a social experiment to see how this worked. I was like, this is what punk rock is for. Like this is the exact thing.
Disrupt. Punk rock's meant to disrupt.
You get these guys who come up and they think they know what this is about, and then they're totally thrown for a loop by these guys who would have been picked on by them, who are just totally flipping it on them. And those are the pieces that really fascinate me, of where you really see people who've seen the superficial aspect, they go out, they think they know what it'll be, and then it's totally something different.
Yeah. No, that's a perfect example.
Or stuff like you have a band like Bad Brains, where pretty unique, I think, to this day, but incredibly unique at the time, of an all-black punk rock band that was the loudest, fastest, and craziest of them in New York and in DC.
And the number of people that like pay homage, that say like, I went to a Bad Brains concert and that's what I wanted to do. Like Henry Rollins has always been pretty honest about that in almost every interview he's ever done. It's like Bad Brains. Bad Brains was in DC, saw the concert. Yep, I want to do that. Vic Bondi, Vic and I, we had a cool conversation, a couple weeks ago for doing research for the Naked Raygun book. And Vic was the same way. It's like, I was in DC, I saw the Bad Brains, I came back to Chicago. I can't remember the name of Articles of Faith before they called it Articles of Faith. But he went back to the guys and was like, we're doing it wrong. Right. He's like, we need to do it like these guys.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, infamously like the Beastie Boys got their name.
Yeah.
And you actually, one of my favorite time wasting rabbit holes now is going on YouTube, and there's a whole subgenre of like reaction videos of people seeing and hearing a band for the first time.
Oh yeah.
And Bad Brains comes up a lot, which is amazing and shocking. Well, not so shockingly, but a lot of it is like young black kids. And it's amazing to see them hear this band and then see the band show up, and they'll be like the shock that these are black guys.
Yeah, whoa, hey, those guys can play some punk music phenomenally.
And I've never seen one of them be like, I hate this. When it'll be like, they don't listen.
Have you seen the Death documentary? Yeah, that was phenomenal.
Amazing. And they sound exactly like Bad Brains at the time, completely independently, which is so weird.
What a great, I don't know, serendipitously came across that one time, like, God, I should watch that. And I watched it, I'm like, that was one of the most phenomenal musical documentaries I've ever seen.
I'm a sucker for almost any music documentary. Like, I watch one regardless if I like the band or not. But the ones about bands I've never heard of, and that's kind of the whole point of that Death one specifically, they're kind of a lost band, like, amazing. I'm like, how did I not know? It's like discovering like an alternate universe. They didn't know it was there. Yeah. Because we can watch all this stuff now, which is kind of amazing. And that's the other piece where there was when you were into this stuff, up until fairly recently, you inherently became a record nerd. Like,
Yeah.
because you had to find it.
You had to work for this.
It was, even if you didn't want to become a record collector nerd, like you just end up being one. And now you can, I mean, I can pull up the most obscure thing ever that I searched for years for instantaneously.
Yeah. Oh, doing the research for this book. I mean, it took me 4 years to write it, the hardcore Reagan book. But in terms of, it would have taken double
easily
the amount of time if I didn't have access to Spotify, YouTube, Discogs. I mean, all of it was instantaneous. Being able to look up. I remember
finding Not So Quiet on the Western Front, the MRR, the 2 album set in 93 in a used record store and like almost passing out, you know?
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things that I've tried to explain to, teenagers as I've worked with them. Like, I feel sorry for you guys. They're like, why? We can get it immediately. I'm like, but the serendipitous experience of going to Apple Tree Records on a Saturday and thumbing through the albums or the cassettes for like 3 hours. And it's a gamble, guys. It's like, I remember, I think it was 24/7 Spies was the band. And I saw it and it looked like Fishbone.
Right.
And I remember listening to my brother's Fishbone cassette tape, which was awesome. Right. and going, oh, man, did I find another one? And I took it home, and it was good, but it wasn't Fishbone. And I remember being so upset. I think I tried to sell it to my brother. I'm like, you should buy this off me.
You like this stuff.
Right? Because it's like I wasted my allowance, And so the hit or miss, but that experience, I mean, 3 hours on a Saturday riding your bike, to downtown and thumbing through just stacks upon stacks of cassettes, hoping to see something. That serendipitous experience, I think, was so cool that these kids, I mean, there's like, well, the algorithm, sends me a new thing. It's like, yeah, I get it.
But it sends you stuff like you already like.
Yeah, but just the idea of, I think it was Judge, right? The straight edge band. At a Revelation, Mike Judge's crew with Porcel, right? Because I had a little straight edge, as some of us have, a little straight edge moment, right? Back in 15, 16 years old, whatever. But I remember I hadn't heard them. I'd been a Youth of Today guy, I'd been a Minor Threat guy. Maybe I think maybe it was the Bold tape. In fact, I think it was maybe Bold, where because Judge I got into later, but Bold, which was a Revelation, kind of Connecticut crew as well. I remember thumbing through and finding it as a sophomore going, this is going to be good.
Yeah.
I had known Revelation Records because of the Youth of Today, but it was one of those ones where I took that home and I put it on. I'm like, aha, right. I did not waste my allowance on this one.
It's a hit. It's a hit.
Yes. Yeah. But the number of times where you bought something, you're like, crap.
Yeah.
Gosh dang it. Right. I got to go do some more chores.
Who's the singer guy from Youth of Today?
For Youth of Today, Ray Capo.
Yeah, Ray Capo. I remember.
Or Ragnar Ruth, I think. I just read his biography.
We
Monk to Punk.
Oh yeah, because he became they became Hare Krishnas or something, right?
Yeah, it's an awesome biography. It really is good. I really enjoyed it.
We were playing in Philly, and there were these punk kids who, right on the edge of West Philadelphia, which was a really rough area for people who know the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air opening credits. Mm-hmm. But they had this big Victorian house. I think one of their moms owned it and rented it to them, cheap. And they all basically had a floor. And so all the bands touring would stay at this house. And I remember getting up in the middle of the night and going down to the kitchen to get a glass of water or something. And Ray Capo's in the kitchen in the dark in his underwear doing Tai Chi.
Yeah.
I was like,
probably in the book.
Yeah. I was like, what's up, man? He's like, how's it going? Just the weirdest thing. But that was,
it is a really cool take on his spiritual journey. I mean, I was, I read it in a couple days. I couldn't put it down. I'm like, this is really, really cool.
Yeah, he seemed like an interesting guy. I mean, from the people that were interacting with him, but again, I'm interacting with him because of that weird, underground distribution and touring network that sort of cropped up alternatively to the other stuff.
There's no Airbnbs, right? You're sleeping on somebody's dingy floor.
Yes. Oh God, I remember people got ringworm from staying at some places.
Yeah.
It was horrific. But then also around that time, especially in New York, to where you, I think, mentioned like when we first started talking, is that sort of fusion of hip hop and punk, which really links up in a hardcore view, like Agnostic Front, and then later like Madball. And you get this like very strange New York centric, like sort of tough guy hip hop version of hardcore.
Yeah. Have you seen the NYHC documentary?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. They get into that a little bit towards the end there. Yeah. That was interesting, right? I never got into that.
Me either.
I don't know why, because like when Rage Against the Machine came out in 93, I think I was a sophomore in college when I saw him open up for Cypress Hill in Iowa City. And just it was a dumpy room. Never heard him before, and had my roommate. He had a car. I'm like, you're driving me to the mall because I got to buy this CD. This band was phenomenal, because I had went to see Cypress Hill. But I don't know why I didn't get into that like real like macho aggressive kind of fusion. But in Rage, maybe it's because I just saw a continuation of the intellectualism of early punk and hip hop that I was so attracted to.
Oh yeah. I mean, Tom Morello's a Harvard grad, and like, or I think of like the evolution of like Living Colour, who sounds so much like Bad Brains, but even a song like that to me was pre-Nirvana. The fact that Cult of Personality was like a top 10 pop hit. Yeah. When if you listen to that song, I mean, musically even, but lyrically, even today, is pretty shocking and insightful and like pretty dead on. And
it was funny. We were actually in the car the other day, my wife and I going shopping, right? And I even write this in the books, like, I thank my wife for being tolerable.
That's mine's the same way, yeah.
Yeah, but she's got Cult of Personality on her playlist. And I'm like, all right, no way you've listened, to a running playlist or whatever. I'm like, yeah, there's probably no way you really dug into these lyrics. But then I'm like, that's not even the best song on that album, right? And I like clicked on the album, and I put on Glamour Boys.
Yeah,
like that was the one. I'm like, we're gonna listen to this song, right?
Like
here.
Open Letter to a Landlord.
This is the critique of the yuppie, late '80s. Polo or Izod wearing, dude. Yeah, that was a cool one.
With lyrically, that whole album, I mean, you could pull those lyrics and stick it in a 1981,
that's a punk rock
record,
album, for sure.
Album, and it would completely fit in. So stuff had sort of changed where like that record by a black rock group could be a top 10 pop album, which is insane to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's such a short amount of time.
Palatable, right? Musically, I think by the end of the decade, the image was palatable. Those guys, they're like, they play strong, right? They play hard. But when you watch those videos, you're like, oh, they don't look all that intimidating.
Right.
In terms of the way they're dressed. I mean, I think in one, is it Vernon Reid?
Yeah, Vernon Reid's the guitar player, yeah.
Corey Glover. So who's the lead singer? He's wearing like a scuba suit.
Yeah, Corey Glover's got like a body glove. Yeah.
I mean, it's not ripped piercings and clothes made by stencils. And,
right. They're not guar.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's such a strange. Again, I'm like harping on this, but like just looking at how as I'm older, I guess time seems different. But like seeing how short of a period that much of an evolution happened, in a decade.
Yeah, I almost with the book, I almost stopped at 85.
Oh,
like when I sat down to do research for the book. Originally, when I wrote it, it was just going to be Reagan's first administration because that's when most of this really took place. Mm-hmm. Now as I dug deeper, and it's like, well, there's still enough happening, and I want to give those bands their credit because a lot of that was the stuff that happened on the coast eventually working its way into the rest of the country, right? And so I didn't want to shortchange the bands that weren't out in LA. Like there is a phenomenal band out of Boise, Idaho, they didn't put stuff out till the later 80s, maybe 86, 87. It's called State of Confusion.
Oh yeah.
Oh, just phenomenal. I mean, I spent so much, like, you want to talk about pretentious record collectors. I'm like, I have to own these two, right? And so I had to get them. One of the bass player, like I communicated with them, right, during the writing of the book. I'm like, you guys were awesome, right? Singing like this really cool, almost eco hardcore at the time. Right, the album was called like 3.6 million acres, or 6.3 million acres, which was the amount of public lands, right, that were in Idaho, right, at that time that maybe Reagan was starting to challenge, right, with James Watt and the Department of the Interior, and so it's like I didn't want those bands to not be included in the story because they got there late, and part of that was also me, you know, I got to it late,
right,
you know, I mean it was 88 when it was 89 when I saw Naked Raygun. You know, my Naked Raygun story starts when those guys came down to Normal, Illinois from Chicago to play the Gallery when I was a sophomore in high school on I think it was the Understand tour. It was either when Understand had just came out or the tail end of the Jettison tour and Understand was about to come out.
They've been a band for 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they you know, Raygun, I mean, the birth of Naked Raygun is really like 1979. You know, when Marco Pizzotti and Santiago Durango meet at the pinball machine. If you get online, it's everything pretty much says O'Banions. In the interview I did with Santiago, he's like, I'm pretty sure it's Exit. I'm like, well, we'll figure it out, right? But Marco's like, no, it was at O'Banions. There was a pinball machine. But I mean, think of that. You know, that's why that band does it so much for me, and you know, Bad Religion as well in many ways, and Social Distortion, right? I love and I guess I appreciate and respect the longevity.
Yeah,
you know, is so impressive. And with Naked Raygun, you know, it kind of stops at 92. You know, I mean, that's when they disperse, I guess, for the first time, but then they come back together periodically and, you know, put something out 3 years ago, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, they never broke up officially.
No, you know, I mean, it was 92. If there's a breakup of Naked Raygun, you know, based on, so I interview all those guys now. I spend 2 or 3 nights a week Zooming. Jeff and we Zoom usually every Tuesday, Thursday nights. John Haggerty and we Zoom usually on every Sunday. Everybody in the band has been phenomenal and welcoming of the project. But it's, you know, 92, they kind of stop, you know, and it's like, all right, I think we've taken it as far as we possibly can. That album that came out, Raygun, Naked Raygun, you know, none of them are really, I don't want to say proud of it because they all go, listen, there's awesome, I don't know if you've
some great stuff on that
awesome,
record. Yeah.
There's awesome songs on that record, but they're all like, it was produced and engineered horribly, right? They you know, they couldn't get Bill Stevens, who's a phenomenal guitar player and one of the most kind people I've ever interacted with. They just couldn't get Bill's sound, you know? And so it's like, you know, John and his sound was so associated with the Chicago sound, right? When anybody asks like, oh, when you hear Chicago sound, what do you hear? Like, oh man, that's Haggerty's guitar. Yeah. You know, even I had an hour-long phone call with Ian MacKaye, which there's a story there that you'll crack up about. But Ian was like, you know, John Haggerty is a fucking phenomenal guitar player. Yeah. I mean, it's like, yeah. Yeah, everybody, you know, about 92 is when they bailed out. But the Ian story, if you want to hear it, it's funny.
I'm always up for an Ian story.
So you know, the working title of the book I'm working on now, which is probably going to take me 3 or 4 years, especially now that I've started a new job, which is probably going to be a little more time consuming than my previous one, is called I Remember, right? And so, you know, the story of Naked Raygun, and it's the band is all on board. Lou Lombardo, their manager, is stoked about it, and we've had some really good talks as well. But I Remember is a song that was written by John Haggerty on the All Rise album, right? And so it's a play on the song because I really want it to be a testimonial, right? I really want it to be an oral history. And so what I've done is obviously have interviews with the band, but then also I've said, I want to reach out to anybody that they played with also to see how they remember the band, right? Because I think that's as important. And so they were huge. Raygun, they were huge compatriots with GI, with Government Issue.
Yeah.
I mean, huge friends. I had a great interview with Tom Lyle. That guy's awesome. And Jay Robbins, I reached out to him and he's like, hey man, give me a couple weeks and we'll do something maybe in later July. I'm like, perfect. Nice. That's awesome. Because all of them are like, we love Naked Raygun. Yeah. These guys are phenomenal. And so I reached out to Discord Records through their webpage because, they played in DC and because in 1989, when they were on their European tour for Jettison, Fugazi opened for Naked Raygun in like Bielefeld, Germany. Right. And so they just came across paths, but Fugazi was the opener and Naked Raygun was the headliner. And so I sent an email, kind of explained who I was and what the project was. And I was in Lawrence, Kansas, picking my daughter up from college, I don't know, a month ago or whatever. And I just walking down the street, I picked up my phone, checked it. I'm like, there's an email from Ian MacKaye.
Makes sense.
I'm like one of the first tapes I ever owned was the Minor Threat tape that my brother gave me. And so I sat down for a minute. My wife's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I just need to sit here for a second.
I need a moment, please.
Yeah, I just need a moment.
Getting the vapors.
I mean, all of that, no heroes, right? And punk, all that shit, that just went out the back door right at that moment for me. Well, we exchanged emails and he's like, no, I'll talk to you. I really will, right? So we had something set up. And for the last 2 years, I've actually been an assistant principal at a pre-K through 8th grade laboratory school connected to ISU, right? Which I write on the back of my book as kind of an unpunk position, right? I'm the assistant.
Or the most punk position.
Yeah, could be, right? Could be, yeah. I'd like to think I was, right? A punk assistant principal. But I'm sitting down one of the last days of school to play guitar for our preschoolers, our 4-year-olds, right? They invited me to the class because they found out I played guitar, right? Through this scavenger hunt. And they're like, will you come play some tune? I'm like, absolutely, right? So I think I played some Steve Earle songs, right? And things like that for them. But as soon as I sit down to play, I set my phone down and it rings and it says Arlington, Virginia. And I looked at the teacher. I'm like, just give me a minute. I got to take this. I answered it and I'm like, Ian? He goes, hey, this is Robert. And I'm like, you're not gonna believe this, man, but I just sat down to play some music for some 4-year-olds. Can I call you back?
The only good excuse.
He was so gracious. He's like, absolutely, right. What was funny is about 20 minutes later, after I played with the kids, I called him back. And he's like, I got to call you back now. I'm in the middle of something. I'm like, hey, that's great. That's perfect. And I hung up the phone and I'm like, oh my God, if I missed this phone call, he called back like 25 minutes later and we had, an hour-long conversation. I mean, it was one of for somebody who grew up listening to Minor Threat and having that band be pretty inspirational, it was incredible. I mean, he gave me an hour of his time to talk about a band that he's like, yep, I remembered them. I really went back into my own personal archives, which you want to talk about an archive.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Like he is a historian's dream. Like he'd ask me, he's like, all right, when did they play in DC? Right. And I'd say, July of 87.
Let me get all the flyers.
He'd go to his diary and he'd pull it up. And it literally would say, I did this. We went here. We went down to this meeting. Oh, and we caught Naked Raygun at the 930 Club. And as usual, they were awesome. I'm like, somebody is going to write your history someday, and they are going to have a treasure trove. Yes, he kept it all. But what a cool moment, for somebody, still a kid inside like me to go, wow, Ian MacKaye took that much time out of his day just to talk to me about a band. Not even knowing who I was.
But a band that he loves, that's the thing, like a true fan and the accessibility of that, which I've gotten with the show too. Like, people that I sort of tangentially knew or know who were like, yeah, I'll come talk about TV for an hour, like Dave Vanian shouldn't be talking to me about television for an hour, like it's the weirdest thing. And it's just cool that we're able to do that because you have a shared interest in something, which is awesome.
Well, and I think that tells us both something about punk.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And its accessibility. This idea that now I won't say names, but not everybody, right, has been respondent, right? A few, I had to send one where it's like, I didn't even get a message from the individual. I got a message from their like people, I guess, for lack of, they don't even know the band. And so me being kind of a flippant jerk that I can be, I sent them back an email with a flyer saying, well, your band opened for Naked Raygun, right, on this day. You became bigger than them, but it'd be kind of cool if you remembered the experience. But everybody that I've reached out to, for the most part, has said, no, we want to help.
Well, there's a respect for someone doing something. It sounds like a dumb oversimplification, but there's a respect for like, oh, you're doing a thing? Awesome.
That was Tom Lyle. I think it was Tom who said that, right? He's a phenomenal guitarist. Jeez Louise. Him and John, are on almost every list I can think of when it comes to, punk guitars. He's like, somebody's got to do this because like we're all getting old.
Yeah.
It's like somebody's got to start telling these stories. And so that made me feel kind of good. Like, okay, then maybe there's a gap, right? That really needs to be filled by people, just the oral side of punk, right? Getting these stories down on paper. But man, the coolest one besides Ian MacKaye was when Jake Burns reached out. He's like, I hear you're trying to get a hold of me to talk about Raygun.
Did they play with Raygun?
Like, absolutely. Right. I love those guys because he's in Chicago now.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Well, that makes sense, actually.
Yeah, because they, so on the Jettison album, they did Suspect Device.
Right. Oh, you're right.
Yeah, and so when they got back together in 2006 for Riot Fest, Jake Burns came on stage and played Suspect Device with
That's pretty cool. Because we played with Stiff Little Fingers when Bruce Foxton from the Jam was playing bass for them. Which would have been like, I don't know, 95.
Yeah, that's incredible, right? That the Jam, I mean, especially when you think about how like contentious that relationship was, maybe even early on in those days.
Oh yes, yeah. It's kind of amazing that the sort of I don't know. There are some people who can still be pretentious, but for the most part, there's still a vibe of we're a bunch of kids doing this thing, and I help you help me, whatever, which is kind of amazing. And it's to your point too, going like ending in 85. When I think about it, the stuff ending in 88, there's like no songs about Bush, like nothing, because no one gave a shit, because you have the
very limited.
The Cold War ends. So that sort of looming thing is over. We literally have a war. I can't think of a single punk band who had anything to say about the Gulf War. Just completely over, and then it's like, until we get Bush 2 that we start to see a resurgence of the sort of similar thing we had with Reagan, but it's like this weird dead time.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy. And I mean, the dead time continues during Clinton as well, right? I mean, you really have one person who's continuing the charge like significantly, and that's Jello.
Of course. Yeah. He's like same shit, different, new boss saves the old boss thing.
Yep. Stayed absolutely totally true, right, to the cause, right, throughout. And his what is it, the critique of Obama, Brockstar Obama,
yes.
right? Just, I mean, brilliant for him, because he kind of wrote an open letter, if I remember correctly, to Obama, like, all right, man, here we go, let's do it. Then pretty quickly he's like, nope, another one, right?
I thought you'd be better than this, but no. Yeah, it's a very interesting, and now, like, to come full circle and to wrap it up, or else I'll keep you all night, is, when we look at, without talking too much about he who I'd rather not be named, the similarities are there, but in a much dumber way, of this sort of pop culture, artificial image of this person with a false sort of patriotic sense of this completely fantastical fantasy of America, and how completely disconnected that is from the reality of most people. And it's an exaggeration, an explosion of what it was like with Reagan. And we're sort of seeing similar reactions from people, but the landscape's so different. Stuff's so instantaneous that I feel like, you know, the kids making dumb memes now would have started a punk band in 1983.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the medium of that they use is much different, right? There's bands still doing it, and what I really enjoyed researching is the first administration of He Who Will Not Be Named that we're talking about. You did see a resurgency of the Reagan bands, right? They're like, okay, we've seen this before. We're gonna do it again, right? So whether it's MDC or Jello, even Bad Religion, right, with The End of History, even Naked Raygun's Over the Overlords, which is not overtly political, still. I think it was Jeff Pizzotti in an interview. He asked the question, like, he said, "What is this fuckery, right, that's happening in America?" It's like, well, that they put out an album, and it's like, well, yeah, you guys caught it. You got it there, right?
If you're writing any lyric about being a good person or any sort of morality, it's unofficially going to be political in this day and age.
Yeah. What I find, and again, I just don't know if we'll ever get it back because, and I don't know if we should.
Or if we need
I don't want to be that like 50-year-old nostalgic old man that's like, damn it, where are your shows?
Right. When I was a boy.
But it's like, it would be kind of cool if we saw. Because there's billions of people on those platforms that we're talking about. And if billions of people are on those platforms, that's not punk.
Right.
So what is the alternative to that to get your message of disaffection out there?
By beating an algorithm where you're not only getting it out to people who already are like a hardcore invested in it.
Yeah. And I don't know what that looks like. I'm not going to pretend to be that smart.
No, we'd be very wealthy.
I just know that what happened in like 81, 82, 83 is like, it's cool, special, unique.
Yeah. And I think I think it was like a unique mixture of where culture was at that point.
And it didn't have to be, the critique never had to be overt, right? I mean, there's the bands that just smack you in the face. It's like, When You Get Drafted, right? Or, Police Story. But then
Youth.
Even you look at like Mommy's Little Monster, by Social Distortion, right? That album, every one of those songs is a critique of life in the early 80s.
Or the Descendants. I mean, the Descendants were for years, until fairly recently, were a very not overtly political band.
Yeah. But a song like I'm Not a Loser, which is one of I played in two bands when I was in high school. When I was a freshman, I was a bass player with some older kids in a band, and they had to teach me everything. But the first two songs I ever learned were Rat Patrol, right? And I'm Not a Loser by the Descendants, right? Which I talk about in the book, right? That the Descendants have basically said, hey, listen, we're not going to do this final. When we play this live, we're not doing the ending.
Right.
It's grossly homophobic.
Yeah, but we were also 15
ending,
when we wrote this in 1978.
Yeah. But the song is an anthem of disaffection.
Or Suburban Home.
Yes. Yeah. Well, what's cool about Suburban Home is that Dave Lombardo, the bass player, he wrote it. And a lot of people don't know this. He was like 30.
Yeah, he was way older than those guys.
And he's writing it because he literally wants to live in suburbia.
Yeah.
He's going to all these punk shows with all these kids, and he's like, I just want the quietude of suburbia. And so he's came out and said that in a couple of interviews, like, I was kind of being serious, right? That, I just want to be a statistic. I just want a nice, quiet life.
Yeah.
I'm old. Yeah.
I want to fade away. Well, this is a whole other discussion that I'd love to have with you sometime, but there's the whole phenomenon that's come out in the last, 10 years of this sort of stupid alt-right incel world where, again, it's an evolution of that misunderstanding of the superficial aspects of this sort of suburban male white middle class rage into a completely incorrect vehicle where
Yeah.
It's,
Yep.
you hear stuff being like, oh, well, supporting, he will not be duped. That's real punk. And it's like, you don't understand anything. Like, no, it isn't and never will be. Like, but they're like, but that's just being contrarian and being an asshole. And it's like, no. And I really, really loved, I don't know if you read when Albini was really posting his mea culpa on Twitter for about a month of sort of, hey guys, this sort of shock humor that we used to use in the mid 80s for this reason. It's not what you think it is. And not even defending himself, being like, yeah, it was not right then. But it's a complete, like, really smartly and easy to understand contextualizing everything.
Yes.
And that was a fascinating, although depressing, look at how these things are misconstrued. Like, I always talk about like watching All in the Family Wrong and thinking Archie Bunker is the hero.
Yeah. But that's a challenge of punk, right? Because it pushed the envelope.
Yeah.
Issues of sexuality and issues of race, and to look at it through our lens sometimes, it's hard, right? And I had to continuously, come back in the book and almost give like a caveat, right? Like saying, hey, like one of the things I talked about in terms of some of the homophobic language that comes across, some of which was just grossly homophobic.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I mean, some of the songs about AIDS.
That, yeah.
Oh God, I mean, I remember. What is MOD's song AIDS, buying that tape and even as a kid going like, oh, this is heinous.
Yeah.
This is horrific. But writing in there, it's like, there's the other side of that, right? So you look at Angry Simone's song, right? Homosexual, which when you listen to it, it's like, oh my goodness, how in the world, right? Could somebody write this? And then you look at the album and go, well, they didn't write it because they're giving credits to Jay Falwell. Yeah. And then you learn that they sent the record to the moral majority. Right. And then you read an interview with them when they're like, if anybody thought we were serious, they're idiots.
Yes.
This is, and then you're like, wow, that is so subversive.
Yeah, 100%. There's another academic guy. Who's taught forever. Actually, Worcester, I think, was teaching. Or like, who is Screeching Weasels? I Want to Be a Homosexual was a reaction to. What was the band that had the song I Don't Want to Be a Homosexual? Oh, it wasn't Poison Idea, but it was a band like that. But then, Screeching Weasels was like, fine, I'll write this song, and it's like, like anything, you get a wide range of idiocy and people who are on the wrong side of things. But it's weird to embrace those pieces as the example instead of the.
It was the same thing with songs that used racist language. Yeah. Right, where there were racial epithets and slurs used in it, and to like even the Dead Kennedys, and Jello using it in a few songs, the Dicks, right, Hate the Police, to have to explain like Gary Floyd, a 300-pound communist queer, is not using that word. Right, he's the mouthpiece of the police. He's
being
officer.
A character in this song.
Yes,
which is strange to me.
And as hard as that is, I mean, it's so hard today, in cancel culture and everything we're going through for us to recognize these moments, but to also go, he's not saying that because he feels that way.
Yeah,
he's a character as you described.
There's a flattening of the art and the artist now, where they're less, even more inseparable than then, in that because people are all public figures and everything they do is part of what they produce, or sometimes secondary even. So I think for younger people, it's impossible to split those for whatever reason. Yeah, they can sometimes do it. Like if I'm an author and I'm writing a novel and the lead antagonist is a racist, you write whatever that guy says and they're not going to be like, how dare you say that? But if you tell the same story in a song, it's not read the same way, which is weird to say that there was like a more sophisticated understanding of song protagonist POVs in the 80s, but there kind of was.
I agree. Maybe we just were less aware.
Yeah. Oh, right?
As a culture overall of, we talk about microaggressions and macroaggressions. And I mean, these types of things I think have made us way more aware of those situations today, to where we look back on what happened in the 80s with the art that we're talking about and go, oh, how dare they?
Right.
It's like,
And was it worth the capital you spent to do that? Does it ultimately make it more effective and helpful? And probably not.
Yeah.
Which is a weird sort of whole other thing. But yeah, I love the book. I recommend it to everybody. I'll put links and all the stuff there. I'm very much looking forward to the Naked Raygun book. As I said, underrated, absolutely underrated band, I think.
I appreciate you saying that, because that's a big part of the argument. Like, you know, people should know that band.
100%.
They have been
100%.
Yep. They have been so inspirational to a lot of, and I really think that had they held on and maybe had a little bit direction, right? They all kind of go like, you know, nobody took the bull by the horns. I'm like, well, somebody would take the bull by the horns in '92.
Yeah.
Things might have been different.
Yeah, I think of like, you're telling me every single one of those Offspring fans wouldn't go listen to the woes of Rat Patrol and be like, I love this band. There's no way, you know, like,
yeah,
it just was, the timing was off. So it's like, but the good thing is the stuff they did is still there and accessible. So, you know, not that.
And those guys, Jeff has Parkinson's, has had Parkinson's for 19 years, right? And so they don't play. But a lot of those guys are still out playing. And so obviously Pierre passed away a few years ago, but Fritz and Bill are playing in a really awesome band now called the Violets.
Oh, cool. I don't know.
A couple of guys from the Methadones
nice.
Are in that band also. I saw them up at the Liars Club in Chicago a couple of weeks ago. Great band. And then John, you know, still playing with Peg Boyd. Peg Boyd right now is actually out on a 2-week tour. They're doing 12 nights and 14 days. You know, John's like 65. We were cracking up about it. I'm actually going to go to Lawrence, Kansas next Friday to catch him, because I was going to head that way anyway. Spend some time in Kansas City with my wife. But I mean, they're still doing it. You know, guys are still out there playing.
Yeah, I remember I was doing a horror convention in Indianapolis a few years back, and the Descendants were playing with the Smoking Popes. I went and I'm like, this is nuts. Like, you guys are still out here doing it, you know. And that was funny, because I was talking to Josh from Smoky Popes, and I referred to the 1997 Everything Sucks Descendants record as the new album.
Oh, yeah.
I played some stuff from the new album. He's like, Ken, that record came out 20 years ago. I'm like, yeah, but it's the new album.
Yeah, it's not Milo Goes to College. That means it's new.
A new one. It's after all, but you know, for them. But fantastic. I'll put links where people can buy this, and you know, I really appreciate you taking the time. Again, I looking forward to the new one, and I could talk about this stuff all day.
Well, you ever want to have me back, I'll be more than happy to, because this was a lot of fun, man. I appreciate it. It's a great show.
There you go. That's Robert. Very much looking forward to the Naked Raygun book. If you have not checked out Naked Raygun, do so immediately. Rat Patrol, such a great song. And speaking of which, actually, there's a really cool thing. All of Steve Albini's stuff. So Steve was one of us, and he had, you know, a lot of stuff. But they are auctioning it off every week. Steve Albini's Closet, it's called. You go to stevealbiniscloset.com. And there's zines, there's videotapes, there's records. I got his personal copy of one of the 7 inches by the band The Sound, which is one of my all-time favorite bands, and Soundgarden's Room 1,000 Years Wide, which is probably my favorite Soundgarden song. And it's so weird that I have the copies that he had. But, you know, everything from Astro Boy t-shirts to, there's tons of stuff on there, and it's fun. Every Friday at noon, they post new stuff. But neither here nor there. In the meantime, you should buy Hardcore Punk in the Age of Reagan, Robert's book. It's very good. It's a great read, and like I said, if you like this show, you will like his book. So I put links here. You can get it wherever books are sold, but it comes direct from the University of North Carolina Press. If you can't find where to find it, just shoot me an email at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken@icanread.com, or go on the patreon.com/tvguidancecounselor, and let me know that you couldn't find it, and I will get it to you. In the meantime, get it here next week. What the hell am I talking about? Get it here next week. Boom. For a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor.
My heart and my best intentions still tell me that's true, but the facts and the evidence tell me it is not. I can go into the Kremlin to the General Secretary's office, pound his desk and say, Mr. General Secretary, I don't like the way President Reagan's running his country.